Hello, good evening, and welcome to our front. Now, today, the biggest conversation in the Republic of Ghana is about identity and whether or not to compile a new register. This conversation is not new. Virtually every single election has had it until 2012, when we didn't do so for 2016. In Kumasi, the biggest conversation, on the other hand, is whether or not people who are angry to get themselves onto the national ID will be there, because of the difficulties the national ID system is encountering. So at different sections of our society, we have one single problem: a national identification system that is robust and big enough to deal with the problems of the state. Now, there's a man who's known for his competence in this area, using technology to fix the problem. He, in the year 2007, suggested we have a unified system to make sure that our ID system encompasses all and can deliver all the goals we want. Recently, we were told by the registry for births and deaths that only 1/3 of the people born in this state are registered. On our front today, Bryce Simmons is my guest. He's the president of MPDG. He's also, they put honorary there, honorary vice president of Imani, Ghana. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
I hope you are doing well today.
We're trying.
So we are in a quagmire of a sort. At various stages, we are trying to still collect data that we're supposed to have for the very important things, because some say because of the state we are in our democracy, elections are the defining moments of our state and the progress we can make. That is having difficulties because of the quest to compile a fresh register. The EC's biggest argument is that the current data source, maybe they call it a center, is problematic. It will soon, and Dr. Bosman brings in the fear that it may crash. When it crashes, we don't have any data at all to go into election 2020. What's happening in Kumasi is also that the promise to deliver a national ID at the point of registration is not happening. Long queues and all the other problems have been encountered there. Can we fix this problem collectively?
So we could, Raymond. The challenge is that there seems to be a tendency to resort to a war of opinion, and who have the political clout to mobilize opinion, as opposed to just getting down to it, looking at the facts, the figures, and making a very dispassionate analysis to determine what can be done, whether it's in terms of establishing a national ID or whether it's about voters' roll or electoral roll reform. I think the issues are actually very simple. The problem is that the current, and I can't begrudge anyone, but the current charged atmosphere means that it's been very difficult for the media to very carefully sift through the issues and one by one tackle them. So I hope we can do that here.
Yes, so I want us to first and foremost take what's happening with the Electoral Commission first. And I remember very well what the need for that 2012 registration was. It was because we needed a more advanced way of identifying people so that they cannot vote twice. And verification devices were introduced. Alongside that, there were big machines, and I saw the registration exercise, which were used to get people's data first onto a sheet of paper, then transferred into this electronic form. Now, since 2012, it's been almost 8 years. 8 years down the line, they say there's a problem with that source information. Indeed, the EC is contesting that it's not robust enough. Two, there's a tendency, and that expression was introduced, that it may crash completely.
So the coalition of CSOs under the Ghana Anti-Corruption Coalition umbrella had a meeting recently, and I understand that Imani was asked to contribute a comment. So the organization looked into the merits of the EC case. Did some policy history as well and some comparative analysis. And we've concluded fairly strongly that the EC really has no case, the way that it is framed the issue. The biometric voter management system is a multifunctional system. It's a multi-part system.
Okay.
You've talked about the data center,
yes,
which is not the same as the databases hosted in the data center.
That's true.
Or even the same as the servers on which those databases are hosted. These are all different things, right? We've also talked about the biometric voter registration kits, the BVRs, which are these machines that you connect the camera, the scanner, etc., to collect the data.
Yes.
And we've talked about the biometric verification devices. These are all separate components of the biometric voter management system. We also have, as you pointed out, a mass enrollment exercise which means what you designate centers, you call people to show up, and then you use these machines to pick up the data, store it in the database, and then later, in the hope that when people come to vote, you will use the BVD, the biometric verification devices, to authenticate them. The EC's case is that it needs a new end-to-end biometric voter management system. And on top of that, it also wants to embark upon mass enrollment to re-register everyone. None of that adds up, and I'll explain why. When it comes to the actual biometric data that is stored, people assume that it's the images you store. It's not the images you store, it's the biometric templates that you store. So it's digitized form of the image. In simple terms, a code, right? You use a mathematical equation to transform the image into a code.
Yeah.
And then that code, there are global standards of how you store that code and produce that code, called the CBEFF. And CBEFF, there is a global organization that has mandates for how you manage it, called the IBIA. The vendor that did our registration process, or managed the software that was used for our registration process, was JoyNews. People confuse Superlock and STL and others. Superlock is a contractor, it's an integrator. It does not make equipment. It does not have software capabilities to generate these biometric templates. It's an integrator. It helps you to secure these components and put together a solution, trains you, and deploy. Their equipment subcontract, I wouldn't even say it's a subcontractor in this case. In this case, their source, their supplier for the actual equipment is a company called HSB International, which is based in the Netherlands. But in 2012, the company that helped with the software for collating the data was one called JoyNews. Now, the thing with JoyNews is that it's a member of IBIA, and it also complies with the various ISO standards that together combines to create this CBEFF that I've been trying to explain to you. What that means, therefore, is that the nature of the stored data is portable, because there are global standards of how you generate them, how you store them, and eventually the algorithms that do the matching, but that's a separate matter.
Okay.
So don't confuse the data, that's your biometric, your image, or your fingerprint, converted to a code and stored.
Which is all we're taking during the registration.
Exactly.
Yes.
Don't confuse that with the matching algorithm that does the authentication must sit on the device, with the data center infrastructure, etc. Now, the question that the EC has raised is, we can go over them one by one. But one, it says that, first of all, the equipment are end of life cycle. That is not too difficult to understand. I mean, if you bought some of these equipment in 2012, some of them will be end of life cycle. The truth of the matter is that they bought them periodically. In 2016, they spent about $3.9 million improving the biometric voter register kits that we have.
Bought additional tools.
They bought additional ones. We've always had these budgetary allocations to buy equipment over time. So which of them are at the end of life cycle? You understand my point? Not all of them can be at the end of the life cycle.
Dr. Bosman insists that it is the ones that we started with from 2012, which is, he says, the additional ones that we bought were in the smaller capacities. In fact, we're talking about, I'm in numbers. So the chunk of it were the ones we had from 2012.
Not a problem. So first of all, it can't be that all the BVRs must be replaced.
No,
right?
it cannot be, yeah.
It can't be that all the BVDs must be replaced, right? The question that you need to ask the EC, and here is our problem at Imani with the EC's position. One is that it's already published a tender. In 16th April, it published a tender that's last year, asking to replace the biometric voter management system itself.
Yeah.
Okay. And in that process, by now, because in May 2019, the EC then, chairperson then started to embark on a campaign to criticize the previous vendors whose contract they had already terminated. Don't forget, though, that when they published this tender, their intent was already clear, which is that they intended to replace the whole system.
Yes.
Good. All the way back in 2019, April, to have prepared a tender, to have got it ready for publication, means that when they came to office in August 2018, soon thereafter, they must have made up their mind that they're not going to use it, right? And the argument they make is that towards the 2018 December limited registration exercise, they already had problems that they anticipated, and therefore they reached out to the vendors to ask about the cost of replacing BVRs and BVDs that they thought were not used when they got a certain sum. How is it that that particular process was not a tender process? If you just write to a vendor and you say, how much will you charge me for this? And they send you a letter, that's an informal letter.
Yeah.
Why, if they had issues with specific BVR kits and specific BVD kits, did they not tender for those specific equipment? You have to understand my point, right?
I get your point.
So they did not do that. They wrote to a vendor. The vendor wrote back to tell them that most of the equipment are a mess. They have to replace it. Of course, a vendor will tell you that. A vendor's job is to sell.
It's to get you to buy more.
Good. Now they tell you that this is what it will cost. Remember that we had already had a history of renegotiating with STL and its partners in the past and reduced significantly the amount that they've charged. If you followed the issue around the Charlotte Osei impeachment case,
yes,
all that evidence was there. The procurement issues was there. We know that generally they quote a certain amount and you negotiate that. Point is, you already had plans to completely replace this. You now go ahead and ask for specific equipment costs. Meanwhile, the other components of the system, right? And in those, as they all come together, you need to find costs for each of them. You need to do a market benchmark study for each of those components. My argument is that the letter that they wrote to STL and HSB to find out how much they would charge was an informal letter and it's irrelevant. What was important is that they should have made an effort to get real market pricing for those items. If they had done so, they would have realized that Kenya in 2017 managed to do BVRs for less than $700.
Really? I'm sure you get the argument, and the argument that's being posited by the EC is that the alternative you are telling us to do, if we go through that alternative of having to replace whatever is currently in existence with a more evolved system, we are more likely going to incur huge losses on behalf of this.
They claim that they talked to one vendor.
Yes.
That vendor said a brand new BVR will cost $5,125.
Yeah.
If they refurbish the existing ones, it costs $3,500, right? And they're saying that no, they can acquire a brand new one for $3,500, so there's no point to use that vendor. My argument is that what is the process for making these claims? That process everywhere in every civilized society is through tendering processes.
So there are competitive bids.
Good, but these are not competitive bids. This is writing to your existing vendor and asking questions. We don't have a clue how these are they frame the questions. We have no way of judging that. What we do know is that the $3,500 that they claim they can buy this for, and the $36 million that they claim they can replace the BVMS for, BVD, BVR, we know that it's grossly inflated. So that already makes us suspect their motives. We know they can do that, that whole BVMS with BVD, BVR, and software, they can do it for less than $15 million. And we present to them the Kenyan experience, where Kenya, using the Morpho devices. Remember Sajam Morpho, the company that in the Kufuor era, of course, it has gone through some metamorphosis since then. Okay. But it was called Sajam. Sajam won the first national ID program in Ghana.
Yeah.
That is the company that helped Kenya to put together its BVRs and BVDs for the last election, the 2017 election. That company has a Morpho tablet that costs $700 or less if you take all the other components, the casing and those kind of things. So the argument is, if you're going to do market benchmark study, do a market benchmark study. Don't tell us that I wrote my vendor and then my vendor says it's $5,125. I've got it for $3,500. That's not how we do proper procurement in this country, right? Secondly, the fact that you have an issue with specific components of the solution does not mean that you need a whole BVMS. So if you're concerned, as you rightly pointed out now, that they are going around saying that you have specific concern with specific components, why were you trying to replace the BVMS way before all of these consultations started in April of 2019?
The argument was that it will be cheaper to do so.
Yeah, but my argument is that there are multiple components of that system. Which of it will be cheaper? And if it will be cheaper, why are you not actually going for the cheaper ones on the market? Why are you relying on some letter that a vendor wrote to you? We don't know what you asked the vendor. We don't know what is the nature of the interaction. We don't even know if it's true. You understand my point? We have ways in which if an organization like the EC wants to replace equipment, it goes and does a market benchmark study. It invites expressions of interest. Based on that, it puts out an RFP. None of that stuff has been done properly. We don't even know whether the April tender that they published has closed properly, whether they've evaluated vendors. On what basis are they saying that they can get these items for $3,500 or $400 and something for in the case of the BVDs?
Yeah.
Where is that data coming from? Have they done any market benchmark study? Is it coming from the tender that they did? If so, have they published the results of the tender? Have they notified people of awards? So why are they always ahead, focusing on the procurement, as opposed to having a conversation in this nation where we have so many people that know a lot about this stuff? engaging academia, engaging civil society, having the consultations, and then if all of us feel that ECS, we can't have a 100% consensus, but if a lot of reasonable people and reasonable citizens feel that the ECS should go ahead and do a procurement, then you go through and do a procurement. You don't do a procurement in 2019 April. Don't tell us what the outcome is. Start a campaign to try and replace this, and then create confusion in terms of what it is exactly that you are replacing, and then insist that you have to do mass enrollment, when, as we've explained, there is absolutely nothing wrong with the data that was collected by Genki because it's CBEFF compliant. Basically, it's numbers that have been encrypted. You transport that into new servers, completely possible. Why? Because the CBEFF standard is not, it's implementation agnostic. It's not tied to the equipment in which it was gathered.
There are various security issues, I'm sure you've heard it. They're talking about the engagements with the people who control these data ends and the people who put it together. Their basic claim is that it is not in the hands of people they can trust, one. And that is a major concern for them. And even if we want to work on these machines or the systems that they put in place, it requires the people who procured it and their engineers to come and work at it. That they can't get EC stuff. The people that the commission with the responsibility to run elections are put in place to do some of these things.
But that cannot be right because they terminated their relationship with these entities before 2018 December, right?
Yeah.
And then since then, they've done 4 major exercises on their own.
Yeah.
If the people that they claim have been preventing the ability to manage the systems were so devious as they claim, how have they been able to manage 4 major exercises since then? The district level elections, the limited voter registration, the Ayawaso by-election.
There was also the creation of
the referendum. The referendum.
Yeah.
Now, they've done all of these things. They've now come up with a view that, okay, in the process of doing these things, though we managed somehow to pay $350,000 to get internal support to manage it on our own, we identified problems that are particularly worrying. The data they have given us does not suggest that. The data they have given us suggests that 0.64% manual verification rate, which is a proxy for false negatives or false rejection rates, right? Yeah. If you cannot use this or you use the manual, then we assume that this was because these were people that were qualified or eligible but were rejected by the system. So that is a proxy for false negative.
But there are people who were actually designated for manual verification because of the
so that's what I'm explaining.
Their face-only option that was given to them.
So the false negative rate is entirely dependent on the false positive rate. Let me explain. And here it gets a bit complicated. If you tell the system that I want you to accept 1% of people who may not be qualified, but their fingerprint look enough like something in the system that it will accept it, the false positive rate, it will affect the false negative rate. If you tighten the false positive rate too high, if you said I want only 0.01% of people that may not really be who they are, but the system, because their fingerprints remotely looks like something that exists, they are allowed. If you say I don't want any of that at all, it will also increase the rejection rate.
Okay.
So it's a calibration process. In fact, how you calibrate it will determine how that works. The National Institute for Science and Technology, for Standards and Technology in the US, does periodic vendor competitions. It calls a lot of the top biometric producers in the world and bring them into the US or elsewhere to show the equipment and to test the equipment. And we've looked at comprehensive studies for several of them. One major outcome is this. If you set the false positive rate to 0.1%, if you say that, look, only 0.1% of all people testing that are false should be accepted, it immediately raises the false negative rate. The people that, even though they are correct, will be rejected to about 1.97%, almost 2%.
So the tendency for somebody to be rejected will be high.
Will be higher, and it's about 2% for a lot of the tests that we've seen.
Okay.
If we have a 2% false negative rate or false rejection rate in global world-class systems, then a 0.6% rate is perfectly acceptable. You get my point?
So the Ghanaian system is not problematic.
It's completely acceptable on those terms. Secondly, the argument then that we need to add a facial scanning technology to it as redundancy makes no sense. Because the only time you want to add redundancy will be if that redundant element is more persistent. And more persistent biometric factor that we have will be iris scanning. The problem is that iris scanning is already provided for in the Jenkins solution.
Yeah.
We don't want that. They want to procure something new. So they say they have to be facial because facial is somewhat not provided for. And my argument is that why will you provide something that is less persistent? What I mean by that if your face you increase in weight, or you have a beard, or you have a mustache, or a whole bunch of things, and you change the haircuts. There are so many factors which changes so regularly that your facial record is not as persistent as, say, your fingerprint. But certainly your fingerprint is not as persistent as your iris.
That's true.
So if they want to really have a redundancy, then the redundancy should be one that maybe is more cumbersome, but it's more secure. And then you have to go for iris. But they know if they say that, we will argue that by the Jenkins system, you know,
provides that.
Can provide that. So they have to come up with this facial technique. Every time you take every point they make, one by one, it doesn't add up. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with the argument that's simple. They need to do a proper architecture of the system. If they haven't done it, if they don't understand architecture, they need to do that. They need to, in each component of that architecture, identify where we need replacements, where we need enhancements and augmentation, and then do proper market benchmarking, pricing studies to identify the cost of those components. You get my argument? So you say, okay, DVDs, what is the best we can do? They are saying they can do $420 or so. $420 is ridiculous. How much does a point of sale terminal with a multifunctional for all manner of things, how much does that cost? You can get that for $150, right? So
it's 4 times that amount.
Yes. So basically, you can get a biometric voter verification device for something in the region of $150. You can look at how much it cost Nigeria, $188 a while ago, how much it's costing Kenya, how much it's cost some other countries like Uganda and the rest. And you can try and do a comparative study to see. There's ID for Africa. ID for Africa is the regional directory for vendors in this space, and they have pricing information available that anybody can access. So already they are trying to inflate costs. Even before they've managed to convince us that this is necessary, their numbers don't add up. They say they can do the biometric voter register kit. Let's keep this thing simple.
Okay.
Really, it's a laptop, your camera connected to the software on board there, the fingerprint data collection. That's really what we are talking about. Then you put it in the casing so that it's hard and rugged and you can move it around.
That's what happened in the year 2012. That's the kind of machine that I saw on the ground when you did the registration.
Yes.
Yes, that's exactly the setup.
I'm saying that the $3,500 that they claim they can do, which is a saving from what their vendors purportedly told them when they wrote to them informally, 5,000. That $3,500 is too high because we can show them, we can walk them to information sources that will give that to them for $700. My argument is very simple. If you do a proper architecture of the system, you will find out that some aspects of it are perfectly fine. The biometric data that has been collected as CBEFFF format is ISO compliant, is portable, is implementation agnostic, which means it doesn't matter where it was collected in that format, you can move it. Okay. Secondly, so we don't need to do mass registration.
Actually, we don't have to go to
not all of us.
Registration ends. Yes.
Not all of us. They can do a limited voter registration.
Which is what happens virtually every year anyway.
They claim that, you know, the limited voter registration in the past was expensive and their mass registration will be cheaper. I don't see the logic. What will your limited, if you're going to register 15 million people afresh, or 16 million people, or 17 million people afresh, versus if you're going to register about 200,000, which is the average for your limited registration. The question that arises in those contexts, is, will this one be cheaper or not? You know, comparing us to the past doesn't help us. If you're going to register 17 million people,
yes, on the basis of it,
500,000
the more numbers you register,
it's very simple. It's more equipment, it's more hiring of people.
Okay.
So if you can do this for 17 million, you claim you need $70 million to do, what do you call it, 70 million people.
Okay.
The question is, what will you need to do 300,000 people if you do a limited voter registration?
Because in 2012, we spent 44 days registering the entire state, everybody in the country. When it came to having to do the limited registration, we did only 10 days. So even the number of days that we spent to register the people.
2016.
Yes.
But then 2016 also had additional improvements made to the system, which raised the cost. 2016 had also an increase in the number of limited registration sites to about 3,000. So there were all of those 2016 elements which increased costs. But that's not the point. The point is that there's no use asking us to do historical benchmarking when we have contemporary benchmarking that's available to you now. You've given us a cost for 70 million, right? You said it would cost you about $70 million. We are saying how much would that cost you to do 300,000, which is roughly what you might want to do if you are doing a limited registration exercise, even if it's $1 million. 17 to a million. You cannot convince us that a mass registration exercise will be cheaper than a limited registration exercise. And when you read that statements that they've been issuing to the press, none of that, none of the arguments, none of the logic holds together. Everything.
Yeah.
I tell you, like I'm trying to explain to you now.
Yes,
they claim that, you know, if you're going to register 17 million people, it's cheaper than limited registration because some time ago we did a limited registration that was expensive. Forgetting all the nuances of that particular process in 2016. I'm saying that what is the contemporary benchmarking now? 70 million versus maybe 500,000. How will that be equal in terms of amount to spend? So that's one point. Once you've done architecture, you look at the mass enrollment as one major component of it. We think a limited registration exercise should not be done more than $5 million. That's a lot of money, way more. So that $70 million is a lot. Then the $36 million they say they need to use to replace the BVRs and BVDs. Our case is very simple. Not all of them needs replacement because you keep buying them, so some of them may be older than others. For those that are older and require refurbishment, if they say that the original OEM, the HSB, is not willing to do it, put out a tender to ask if replacing those will cost the $3,500 that you claim will cost. If indeed you did a tender in April, and those were the numbers you were given, publish them and let's see. But the problem that we have is that that tender was an undercover tender. The publicity was poor. Most of you did not know they did a tender in April of last year. We don't know whether they closed the tender. We don't know there's been a notification of award, it was been aborted. So
we asked for the detail. So which people really submitted?
They will not tell you.
Bids
can you understand this situation? They will not tell you what happened. They will not tell you what the situation was. Then they start putting out numbers. We will do it for $3,500 for the BVR. We'll do it for $420 for the BVR. We are telling them that if they want, civil society can help them do a procurement exercise by providing information that will reduce the cost by up to a third of that $36 million. We can put it down to as low as $50 million because we know for a fact that if they did competitive tendering for components of the system that are necessary, they will get to that. Then it comes to the data center. We have NITA, which is the country's center of excellence for data management in this country.
Recently, we built some facility like that.
We have issues with the way NITA has been run for a while now. But the truth of the matter is that if you want to do a data center, there are co-location opportunities that requires that somebody else be responsible for security and all of those details. You don't necessarily have to go and own your own data center when that's not your specialty.
This is an independent electoral commission. An electoral commission that feels that it has the right.
But does it make its own equipment?
No, of course. Good. I mean, you have to.
It doesn't do its own software.
That's true.
It doesn't compile its own algorithms for matching, right?
Not at all.
In fact, it's in that regard, you should know it's not an independent organization.
That's interesting.
Right? You have to rely on people all the time. Now, what we are telling them is that civil society has perspectives. And in the same way that they've relied on other people for these matters, we are coming from the governance perspective. We are not vendors.
Yeah.
We don't have anything to sell to them. And the argument is that if they objectively and open-mindedly listen to us, they will get in the information that they need to improve upon their process. Because what they are telling us right now doesn't add up.
But let me be clear. Were you part of the meeting that the EC held? They said they did a presentation.
No, it's happening tomorrow.
No, they say they had a previous one where they had engaged and done a presentation to what they call the civil society.
I doubt that anybody from any of those civil society organizations that have met recently and will be issuing a statement after meeting the EC tomorrow. Mr. Kofi Bentel is coordinating that effort. I'm pretty sure that on the GACC side, some of the names that you know, the H. Kwesi Prempeh, the Kojo Asantes, and the rest are all there. My argument is nobody has done any proper consultation.
Yes.
And you have to ask yourself, if they really want to solve a problem, and you live in a country, you are an official in a country. They claim they are independent body, but they are still a constitutional body, right? They are here to help governance. You have a research community, you have an academic community, you have a think tank community, you have a whole tech industry. There's a chamber of technology in the country. If you really want to solve problems, why would you not ask for free inputs? Why would you rush to ask your vendor how much it costs?
Which should have more, which should be free. I mean, it will not be compared to whether you are called for consultants to come and do the kind of.
Then you tell us you spent $250,000 on local consultants, local IT consultants.
So that's the question I was coming to.
Right?
Yes, yeah.
And those professionals, what is their written opinion? Why have you not shared their written opinion? Why have you added some stuff together that doesn't add up? Every time you pick any piece of it, you start to struggle. What is the fundamental logic in that statement? Every time you pick any piece of it.
But AC is bent on going ahead with its plan.
Yes.
Indeed, as of the last few hours, its eminent committee, advisory committee, is saying that it should engage more with political parties, with civil society and all the other groups, and they are going to proceed with that. But they insist that the decision to compile a fresh register is solely within the remit of the EC,
What if
as
tomorrow,
given by law.
Okay, what if tomorrow they decide that they will reduce all the voting centers to 10% of the current number?
But
they have the power, right?
That will be but it will sound preposterous because it's going to inconvenience.
That is why we are trying to convince them that their current proposal is preposterous. So if you accept that, even if you are an independent constitutional body, it behoves on you to be reasonable and not capricious. Remember those injunctions in the Constitution?
Yes, of course, yeah.
All of those things are meant to establish that independent administrative bodies have a duty to be candid, have a duty to be thoughtful, fair, etc. in all their dealings. Yeah. Secondly, we have national objectives of development, growth, public purse preservation and protection. These are all powerful principles. And EC is in government, right? It's an independent government institution, but it's in government.
That's true.
It behoves on the EC to be completely willing to engage with sound opinion.
Is it possible that the words you've heard, and I've not heard from the IT lead at the EC, that I've heard only from commissioners and the other
Which
people,
itself is problematic.
That's also the point I'm trying to make here. Is it possible that the actual problem, the people who are communicating are not able to put it out properly?
Okay.
So it sounds preposterous in our ears, but the reality on the ground is that there's a bigger problem we are yet to confront.
What we have to understand in this country is that there is a process, or rather there's a dimension in most of the things that we do which is related to governance.
Yeah.
Governance is by its nature multidisciplinary. So it means that you may have IT specialists on the front line. When it comes to governance, it's almost like in your company.
Yeah.
You have a board of directors.
Yeah.
You know the reason they bring the board of directors to play the role that they play? It's not purely because they have to satisfy statutes. It's because they bring perspectives from different backgrounds, but somewhat sufficient exposure to the issues that you will face, that they can give you multidisciplinary advice. That is the nature of governance. So IT people, if you ask them a specific question, and they are specialists and on the front line, they will give you a specific answer. The process of strategic review includes the questions to ask. And often asking those right questions is a matter of training, it's a matter of experience, and it's typically the role of the board of directors. Now, in the EC as an advisory body, right?
Yes.
My argument is that in the same way that it opens up for consultation because the different perspectives enables it to enrich the dialogue, it should do that if it really is interested in the governance of its technology. It's not merely about procurement, getting some vendors here and only self-interested people, consultants that are being paid, and if they give you the most expensive option, you pay them more. You need to also ask yourself whether you can have independent, truly altruistic opinions from advisory bodies in the country. And indeed, if you genuinely want to improve on the outcome, you should want that. So the question you ask is that, are there aspects of it that are too technical and perhaps are not yet out?
Yes.
That's a profound question. My thinking is the very high-level structure of the argument must make sense before we delve into details.
Okay.
So if, for instance, you're not aware that the biometric data collected and stored is to ISO standards, and that the vendor that did that is world-renowned for being one of the pioneers of some of these ISO measures, if you don't know that as an example, and it's evident in your writing, you definitely are not consulting professionals. I get my point.
And cannot necessarily come from and this should come from the IT professionals too. And they should know some of these things because to qualify in that space, you should be able to know this.
I agree with you. I think that is an important point. So yes, in some of our remarks and the rest of it, we need to be cautious in the sense that we don't have the full benefit of the technical advice they've had. Yeah. But that is not our fault, right? They could put that out as well.
That's true.
Secondly, there's no reason why the IT head of whatever is not engaging that segment of public opinion. There is a specialist segment of public opinion.
That's true.
There are technology companies in this country. There are people that in the 1990s were technology leaders from Herman Chineri-Hersey, Michael Amankwa. All of these people are still in this country. So there is a segment of public opinion that is very technical and very specialized that can engage. The point is that what they've done, the consultation process is shoddy. So first of all, they threw it out there that it was going to happen. Then they saw that there was agitation. Then they rushed out and cobbled some document together. And the document didn't add up. And my point is, you've had since April to decide that you don't want to do this. This is my key argument. You've had since April, right? Because once you publish a tender, it means that you've decided for sure that you're never going to use the system. You must have taken the decision sometime in December of 2018. Why are you now engaging in consultation? Why not consultation before? And even once the tender had been, you've had some outcomes.
Especially when you know the history of compiling registers and the difficulties has always been in this country.
Yes.
And the fact that it becomes a very thorny issue and people debate it all over the place.
And $70 million is not cheap.
Yeah.
And if you say on top of that, you will need another $36 million for this and another $10 million or so for other components, etc. So we are now hinting towards something in the region of $140, $150 million additional expenditure. Some people think by the time we are through, because what the EC tells us that these are all provisional numbers and they will let us know when they finish. We may talk about $200 million in new expenditure.
Wow. And
I'm saying that part of the process of governance is to engage with all sections of society in a manner that ensures that you produce optimal results as a leader.
At least we get something more efficient,
cheaper,
cost-effective,
etc.,
and all of that,
etc. So they don't have a point. They've made an argument that they talked to their vendor said it would be very expensive, they can get it cheaper. We've proven that it's not cheaper, it's way more expensive, in fact it's inflated. Okay. And if they're already inflating figures, that makes us very suspicious. We've made it very clear to them that the data that is stored is a CBFF compliant data. Genki is ISO compliant and it's been for years, and that data is completely portable, it's cross-platform, and its implementation are going to stick. We've made all those arguments. We've also further gone ahead to make the argument that when it comes to the data center arguments that they are making, the platforms that they have to buy and the rest of it can also, through benchmarking studies, pricing benchmarking studies, be reduced to reasonable amounts so that in the end, the overall architecture is augmented and renewed. But it doesn't mean that you auction or you go out there and ask to procure an end-to-end BVMS. It doesn't work that way.
That you have to clear the current system in all of its form.
Good. Well,
including the registers and everything, and clear them so that it goes through a very fresh phase of doing everything all over again. Remember also that
because of the nature of this solution, as I've described it, the architecture, multiple components, inevitably it's going to be multiple vendors that supply you.
Yeah.
Okay. So tendering for an end solution is really tendering for an integrator. For somebody to come and say, I can put it together for you.
I can get all of these people to come and give you.
But that means, therefore, that you should have done your own independent price benchmarking study first for the components to have an idea, so that you have an idea of what would be a competitive bid. You understand my point? I'm saying that we have done that for them. And the amounts they have started mentioning for major components of it, whether it's in terms of the amount of money they think they need to do the fresh enrollment, or whether it's in terms of the specific components like the biometric voter registration kits and the biometric voter verification devices, all of those costs that they are putting out there is grossly inflated. Grossly inflated.
Wow. Anyway, I did tell you that this is a problem, but this problem is part of the bigger problem. The bigger problem of how we do national ID systems in the country, because effectively, we are seeking to find a role on which people can be properly identified to go and vote.
Yes.
And this role is where the main problem really is coming from. We are also compiling one for a national ID, very fresh one with what we are told an enhanced system with better technology than we did in 2007, 2008, or around that time when we were starting all of this conversation. And we've tried consistently to upgrade that. And we're also registering people for national health insurance, which is also supposed virtually everybody who's willing to register and go through the process. What can we have this unified, coherent system of an ID structure that doesn't lend itself to so many cards, so many registrations, so many different data collection points, which is basically like having more money being paid to doing different things. And along the line, the course of the year, we'll be collecting the main data by the statistical service too, which is also supposed to be a national census of a sort. Can we have a unified system?
So I think most people confuse a unified system to mean a central database, as in there's one location, you collect all the data, all the conceivable information you might ever want, and everybody plugs into it somehow. That is not really a sensible approach, because different needs evolve differently in different locations. So when we talk about a common system, we are talking about a common interoperable standard for Ghana that enables us to unify our infrastructure, to harmonize the data collection, and to reduce costs. Am I making sense? So we are talking about systems that talk to each other. That means that if somebody has already done some basic work, you don't do it all over again. So an example would be that you have an NIA that collects the most vital statistics, the most critical elements about the human being. Make that available, and then create APIs that other agencies can tap into to populate the base.
Okay.
And then they can say that for different purposes, you have the option to add additional information to your profile in my network. The problem is that, and this may not be the right medium to go into great depth about how you do an interoperable system of that nature. But the key principle is the government's political will is somewhat lacking. And it's not just this government. It's been several governments over the time. Already, you know, most people are not aware, but they are compiling a biometric canoe, a biometric canoe verification system for premix and stuff. Somebody's already busy trying to build a system for biometric
for
verification
just the fisher
for fisher folk. Now the question is, if they really wanted to do a harmonized system, they will have put together the harmonized system and prioritize that, and then this biometric process will build on top of that to save cost. So the political will is lacking, which is why they keep coming up with these things. That's why Senate will continue to do this pension enrollment thing and refuses to abide. Somebody has to decide that they really want to do the hard work, not the procurement work. And that's the trick. To define that standard requires a lot of top-level government officials sitting down, working with each other to think very hard about what we mean about national identity and civil registration in this country. At one point, they put together a committee headed by Dr. Grace Abediakon to try and figure out what is the issue around civil registration in this country from end to end, asking what they did with that report. Now, the point is that part of it is not very juicy. So the tendency is to rush quickly to procurement. Because somebody has to sit there.
Which where the money is really.
Yeah, of course. Somebody has to sit there and say, okay, what will be the mechanism for how the police access this, but the health authorities don't? How is it that you're going to define what level of access an inspector can have at the BNI, but not somewhere else? These are very difficult questions. And the World Bank tried when I think that was when Mr. Chikata was here, I'm not too sure. The World Bank tried to convene some kind of national consultative body. Okay. Independent people with nothing to sell to the EC and all of these bodies who can contribute ideas, and they did it, you know, at the World Bank location. Many of us spent a lot of time contributing ideas and the rest, and they threw all away because it's not exciting. Anytime somebody wants to solve a problem in this country, the first thing they look at is the procurement opportunity, and that is what we must go to the root of and tackle. And that is why Imani and the CSOs are coming very hard on the EC on this occasion, because it's as if the procurement opportunity is dominating the public interest and public policy. And if public policy is going to, you know, really work in this country, we need to be able to become alert and vigilant about the procurementization of problem solving. Because it appears as if every time there is a problem, rather than sit down and say, look, where do I get the best ideas and then come up with some real strategy, practical, pragmatic that works, we rush to do a procurement. And that is what we are facing also with national ID.
But is it not a problem also with capacity? Because you need to think through some of these issues. You need the right stuff. You need the right brains to do some of the thinking.
And we have them in every level of the society. In the civil service, in the academic community, in think tanks. This country is brimming full of talent.
But it depends on whether all of these are available and can be used at the point that...
No, because if you are not MPP, you are an issue. If you are not NDC, you are an issue. If you are not coming to the minister to come and beg him, he doesn't trust him. I mean, there's all manner of funny cultural issues. But my argument is, when are we going to allow these cultural issues to limit our ability to focus on real problem solving? Coming back to ID, look at the way we designed the ongoing national identification program. We said it's going to be a public-private partnership, and that their private vendor is going to contribute in the region of $169 million thereabout. The government is going to contribute $124 million thereabout. And we end up with, you know, a very huge amount of money, $240 million thereabout. We know for a fact that the resource constraints facing the National Identification Authority originates from the poor planning of the whole setup, and I'll explain why. You see, first of all, the projections in terms of revenue that this system is supposed to make is completely unrealistic. It's completely unrealistic. For instance, there's an assumption that over the life of the program, they are going to make more than $400 million from the National Health Insurance Authority.
Yeah, because we will need the data.
But does the National Health Insurance Authority currently spend $400 million on data management?
No.
So why will you have that thought that you're going to be able to extract that amount of money from the National Health Insurance Authority?
I see.
They want to extract millions of dollars, I think about $100 million, I don't recall exactly, from GRA. All of this is completely preposterous. Nobody's going to give you that kind of money. So today, the earnings is mostly from registering the foreigners, which is giving them something in the region of about $650,000 to $700,000 a year. How do you project from there to a system that is supposed to generate more than $1.2 billion over 15 years? It's not realistic. So what that has then meant, I presume, is that after having done the numbers and now that they have more data and the rest of it, it's becoming quite clear that it's not as profitable as it looks. they are rationing resources. And why do I say they are rationing resources? I say they are rationing resources because look at the registration that is happening currently. If you go from location to location, and you wait till you finish this location before you go to that location, that means that you have a certain cap to your total capacity, which is reflected in what you do in one particular area. Now, if you take what they are doing in Ashanti region now, where about less than 900 stations are being used, it gives you an idea of the overall capacity. And then you remember that when we did 2016 limited voter registration, we were talking about 3,000 centers.
Yes.
If in a national ID program, they cannot manage 3,000 centers, because if they could, then they would do multiple regions, right? Yeah. It tells you a lot about the resource constraint that is confronting them, which brings up the question, who spends almost $250 million to do a national ID for 30 million people and gets resource constraints? It means that the plan is not proper. If you look at the amount of commitments that the government has released so far, it's about $105 million. So the government has almost paid this $124 million. The question is the private sector partner paying up to the extent that they expected the private sector partner to pay? Why is there no information to be found in any of the disclosures to the public, to Parliament, and the rest of it? That would tell you whether indeed we have the resources to do this properly. And how do we know we're having trouble? We know we're having trouble because currently they are doing about 6.5 million people, right? Yeah. Good. They have 2 more regions to go. In fact, they're almost done with Ashanti. Ashanti is, sometime next month, I think around 20 or something like that to be over. Then they go to, I think, Central is the last. So we can project how many people they're going to register in total, looking at the trend so far, since April, right? Yeah, when you project that trend, you get to something around 8.5 million, 9 million people.
Less than the half of the population.
Okay. It's about 30% of the population. In that number, they've issued half the cards. Yeah. Or just a little above half, about 60% of the card. I project that by the time they are through, they will issue maybe 55% to 60% of the cards. Here is what is interesting. The earlier registration we started in 2010, we enrolled 15 million people. And at that time, that was more than 60% of the population.
That's true.
We issued 2.something million cards.
Yeah.
That, at that time, was about 12% of the population, the rest. What we are having now is less than what we did in 2010. And you know what is fascinating? A good chunk of the reason why they cannot issue the cards to a lot of people is because of the adjudication process that they've implemented, which is that they want backwards integration with the old system. You understand what that means? The old system that they implemented, you remember the old system they implemented? Yeah. Okay. When you submit data today, they want the data you submit today to be compliant with what is associated with your biometric record in the old registers. Yeah, but if you knew that, if you knew you wanted to do backward integration, you could very well, rather than spend, voting all of these amounts of money and the rest of it, have started the whole process with an augmentation of the previous data collected. The fact that you wanted to do a card, a 148 KB card, has nothing to do with the data that was stored, so long as it's CBEFF compliant, which is a point that we continue making. So we don't have a situation where the adjudication process means after they finish registering everybody, we're going to have about 40% to 45% of all the people that were registered being told to go to various district locations to go and prove that the discrepancy was pure mistake. I mean, look at the amount of effort that that's going to entail. Worse than that, the mass registration exercise did not even get to 50% of the population. Yeah. So continuous registration must kick in. Continuous registration requires investment planning. When you look at the current investment planning that has been done, the government initially thought that they were going to get revenue. So when you look at previous medium-term expenditure frameworks, they were talking of things like we'll give them $1.5 million a year. Okay. We'll give them $2 million a year. Now they've come back to their senses. Latest MTEFs show that they're going to give them $20 million, $18 million, an amount of money like that.
So we pump more money into it.
So how do we continue to spend money beyond what was projected in the beginning, knowing very well that the private sector participants can only continue to inject resources if revenue continues to come, because it's a business plan.
That's true.
They have the Danish had to give money to enable this to happen. People don't realize that. The ICPC Center had to be funded by Danish money. Now, that money that was soft loans, it meant that the private sector, that is the banking, the financial sector, was very cautious. Now that it's quite clear that the system is not going to make as much money, it requires policy review. The problem is they're not going to be candid. They're going to come out to the public and explain what the dynamics are. If you make any of these comments like I'm making now, they'll say that you are against, you are negative. I mean, how do we continue with that problem? Issues require candor. It requires focus. And it requires a certain openness and receptivity to ideas. And my problem is that we don't have that. And that is the basis, and that is the cause of all the challenges we've had in national education and all of these other things.
Wow. We sure should get back to this conversation after the civil society groupings meet the AC and, more importantly, the advisory grouping that's going to mediate this conversation. Perhaps after that we'll be clear on exactly what the way forward is supposed to be. But you are clear in your mind that currently the path the AC pursuing is not good enough.
No, it's not justifiable.
Yes, okay. So that's basically the flaw.
It's three things, as I've said.
Yes.
It's a multi-component system, so we need to look at it as an architecture. Different parts of it require different things. So trying to tender the whole thing at once without consultation, the rest of it is poor. Secondly, once you've taken each of those individual components, the current projections of cost that they are providing is 3 times overinflated.
Okay. Well, Bryce Simmons, thank you so much for being with us today. We're sure she'll have you consistently on some of these matters.
If I'm in the country.
Yes. We hope you stay around for a longer period. And what, folks, that's where we end today's edition of Upfront. Many thanks to you for joining us on this rather exhilarating conversation.